And the Oscar goes to Dances with Wolves, Jim Wilson and Kevin Costner, producers.
When Dances with Wolves galloped into theaters in 1990, it looked like a massive gamble. A 3-hour frontier epic directed by an actor with no directing experience, filmed in extreme conditions, and delivered largely in Lakota Sioux language, was not what Hollywood expected to make money. But Kevin Costner's passion project became a cultural moment, sweeping 7 Oscars and reshaping how audience thought about Westerns and Native American representation. Yet behind its sweeping landscapes and lyrical tone lie dozens of strange and little-known facts about how it came to life. Here are 20 strange facts that show just how unusual and unlikely this film really was. Number 1. The novel was almost never published. Dances with Wolves began as a manuscript by Michael Blake, who was close friends with Kevin Costner. At the time, Blake was a struggling writer who had been living out of his car and working odd jobs. Costner encouraged him to turn an early screenplay draft into a novel, believing that a published book would make the eventual film easier to pitch. Most publishers rejected it outright, considering the story of a Union soldier living among the Sioux tribe too quiet and uncommercial. Eventually, a small publisher, Fawcett Gold Medal, agreed to print the novel in 1988, but only in paperback, with an initial run of just 5,000 copies. Without Costner's persistence, the book might have vanished into obscurity before ever reaching Hollywood. Number 2. Kevin Costner's vision was dismissed by Hollywood. When Costner began shopping the idea of adapting Blake's book, most major studios turned him down. The objections were consistent. The story was too long, too slow, too native-centric, and it had little commercial hook. Executives also doubted that audiences would sit through extended dialogue in Lakota Sioux. United Artists initially agreed to develop the film, but withdrew funding when the budget projections soared past $15 million. Ultimately, Costner had to raise money independently, convincing Orion Pictures and a group of foreign investors to take the risk. His personal reputation as a rising star after The Untouchables, 1987, helped, but many insiders predicted disaster. Number 3. Preserving the Lakota language was non-negotiable. One of the most unusual creative choices Costner made was insisting that large sections of dialogue be spoken in Lakota Sioux, subtitled for audiences. At the time, very few mainstream films included extended dialogue in indigenous languages. Costner brought in Doris Leader Charge, a Lakota teacher and elder from South Dakota, to serve as language coach and translator. She trained both native and non-native cast members in pronunciation, rhythm, and respectful delivery. Later, she was so respected that she appeared in the film as Pretty Shield, the wife of Kickingbird. Many studio executives feared this choice would alienate audiences, but it became one of the film's defining traits. Number 4. The film wasn't shot where you'd expect. Although the story is set in the Dakota Territory, most of the film was actually shot in South Dakota, near the Black Hills and Badlands National Park. The production required enormous stretches of untouched land, far away from highways, power lines, or signs of modern life. Over 20 different private ranches and federal lands were used, stitched together to create the illusion of one continuous frontier. Filming was grueling. Temperatures swung from sweltering summer heat to freezing autumn nights, and sudden thunderstorms often destroyed equipment. Building Fort Sedgwick, Dunbar's outpost, required a full construction crew and was done in such a remote area that supplies had to be hauled in by wagon and helicopter. Number 5. The buffalo hunt was real and required hundreds of riders. One of the most jaw-dropping sequences in the film is the buffalo hunt, and unlike today's CGI-heavy productions, it was staged with actual buffalo. More than 3,500 buffalo from a South Dakota ranch were used, and wranglers from across the Plains states brought in over 300 riders to recreate the scene. For safety, stuntmen and native riders worked side by side to direct the herd while helicopters captured overhead shots. Special effects crews created a few animatronic buffalo for close-up gore shots, including one with a spear embedded in its side. Even so, most of what audiences see is real. Hundreds of animals thundering across the prairie. The scale was so immense that it could only be attempted once a day, and the scene took weeks to capture. Number 6. Kevin Costner performed many of his own stunts. Costner wanted to make the film feel authentic, and that meant being on horseback as much as possible. He trained intensively to ride bareback and to perform the sequences where Lieutenant Dunbar charges into battle or races alongside the buffalo. Though stunt doubles were on set, Costner performed many of the most dangerous moments himself, including being dragged across the prairie during a chase scene. Insurance companies objected, but Costner believed his physical presence was essential for believability. His horsemanship impressed not only audiences but also the Lakota cast, who noted how seriously he treated the skills of frontier riding. Number 7. The wolf, Two Socks, was played by two animals. The wolf that bonds with Dunbar, named Two Socks for its white paws, became a fan favorite. In reality, the role was played by two trained wolves, Buck and Teddy, handled by animal trainer Monty Cox. Wolves are notoriously difficult to train because they don't respond to cues like domesticated dogs. The production team spent months acclimating the wolves to Costner's presence so they could shoot intimate scenes. For safety, scenes where the wolf had to snarl were filmed with Costner at a safe distance, and editing created the illusion of closeness. Despite the challenges, the wolves' natural behavior lent the film a quiet authenticity that could not have been faked. Number 8. John Barry's score nearly didn't happen. John Barry's sweeping score became a hallmark of the film, though he nearly passed on it, fearing the Western label. Kevin Costner pushed for Barry from the start, admiring his Out of Africa work. Barry finally agreed, recorded with a full symphony despite high costs, and created one of his longest continuous scores. It earned him an Academy Award and became one of his most enduring works. Number 9. Fort Sedgwick was built from scratch in a remote location. The lonely outpost where Dunbar begins his transformation was not a set on a studio lot, but a full-scale fort built in the middle of the prairie. The production team chose a location far from any modern intrusions, so remote that the crew had to haul in lumber, tools, and even drinking water. Fort Sedgwick was constructed to period specifications, using hand tools and techniques authentic to the 1860s. After filming wrapped, the set was left to decay naturally, blending back into the prairie. Today, faint traces of the fort can still be seen by visitors who trek out to the original site. Number 10. The cast included actual Lakota Sioux families. Authenticity was a guiding principle of the film, and many of the extras and supporting actors were Lakota Sioux from reservations in South Dakota. Entire families were cast to appear in camp scenes, and they often brought their own regalia, beadwork, and traditional clothing. Doris Leader Charge ensured accuracy in dialogue and behavior, correcting actors when gestures or phrases strayed from cultural norms. The involvement of Native communities gave the film a level of realism rarely seen in Hollywood at the time, though later critics debated whether Costner's vision still reflected a white savior narrative. Number 11. The film's runtime nearly killed its release. Kevin Costner originally cut Dances with Wolves into a 4-hour assembly version. He believed the story needed to breathe with long, quiet stretches to show Dunbar's gradual transformation. Studios balked. Few theaters wanted a 3-hour western, let alone 4. Editor Neil Travis worked with Costner to pare it down to about 180 minutes for theatrical release. Even then, Orion Pictures worried it would be too long for mainstream audiences. The strange twist is that the film's length became part of its strength. Audiences and critics embraced the slower, meditative rhythm, and in 1994, Costner released a 236-minute extended cut on home video, which many fans now prefer for its added depth. Number 12. The wolf nearly refused to perform. Two Socks, played by wolves Buck and Teddy, often resisted direction. In one key scene, the wolf wouldn't approach Costner until he sat quietly, avoiding eye contact. The unscripted moment created such natural tension that it stayed in the final cut, a reminder that the crew was working with wild animals, not props. Number 13. Filming conditions took a physical toll on Costner. The South Dakota shoot stretched from the heat of midsummer into the icy winds of late fall, and Kevin Costner endured long days of horseback riding, stunts, and harsh weather. Crew members noted how physically demanding the production was, with Costner often appearing more worn down as filming progressed. The change unintentionally mirrored Dunbar's transformation, a soldier growing leaner and more weathered as he left his old life behind. Number 14. The battle scene at the beginning was a nightmare to film. The opening Civil War charge was one of the film's hardest scenes, involving dozens of extras, artillery, and trained horsefalls. Explosions spooked several animals, and Costner nearly fell when his horse bolted. The sequence cost nearly $1 million, but made the film's later prairie serenity even more striking. Number 15. The Sioux dialogue was subtitled differently in English and Lakota versions. Most audiences saw the film with English subtitles translating Lakota dialogue, but when the film was screened on reservations, the subtitles were sometimes removed or changed. In some cases, Lakota speakers noted that translations simplified meaning, omitting the nuance of ceremonial language or kinship terms. Later releases attempted to correct some of these issues, and a few community screenings even ran without subtitles at all, allowing Lakota audiences to enjoy the film entirely in their own tongue. This unusual dual experience, English viewers reading subtitles while Lakota viewers already understood, was almost unheard of in mainstream cinema. Number 16. Academic reactions were divided. While audiences embraced Dances with Wolves, Native American scholars and activists gave mixed reviews. Some praised the film for its attempt at authenticity, respectful use of Lakota language, and casting of Native actors. Others criticized it for perpetuating a white savior narrative, with Costner's Dunbar positioned as the bridge between cultures. Vine DeLoria Jr., a Standing Rock Sioux scholar, noted that while the film was sympathetic, it still framed Native history through the eyes of an outsider. This strange tension, both groundbreaking and flawed, became part of the film's legacy and fueled decades of debate in classrooms and journals. Number 17. Wrangling the buffalo required ingenious tricks. The buffalo hunt sequence was not only massive in scale, but also required creative solutions to keep the animals in frame. Trainers used feed trucks hidden behind ridges to guide the herd, while riders flanked the sides to prevent stampedes veering off camera. A few trained lead buffalo were placed strategically to encourage the others to follow. Even with these tricks, the animals often ignored cues, forcing the cinematographers to adapt on the spot. Helicopters circled above to capture wide aerial shots, but their noise sometimes spooked the herd, delaying filming for hours. It was one of the last large-scale animal-driven stunts attempted in Hollywood. Number 18. The film stock was chosen to capture warmth. Cinematographer Dean Semler shot on 35mm film stock that emphasized warm tones, especially during sunrise and sunset, to make the land itself feel like a character. Test footage on a 16mm guided the look, and the painterly result earned Semler an Academy Award for turning ordinary prairie grass into a cinematic spectacle. Number 19. Authentic costumes came from Lakota artisans. While many extras were Lakota families, the clothing they wore stood out because much of it was handcrafted by native artisans specifically for the film. Costume designer Elsa Zamparelli collaborated with tribal craftspeople to produce beadwork, feathers, and hides that reflected 1860s styles. She even asked that some garments be intentionally aged, smoke-stained, patched, or worn down, so the Sioux camp would feel lived in rather than theatrical. This attention to detail gave the film a documentary-like authenticity that critics later praised, and it contributed to Zamparelli's Academy Award nomination for Best Costume Design. Number 20. Michael Blake wrote a sequel novel. After the success of Dances with Wolves, author Michael Blake continued the story in his 2001 novel, The Holy Road. Set 11 years later, the book follows Dunbar, now fully integrated into Lakota life, as the tribe faces mounting threats from U.S. expansion and the destruction of the buffalo. While it never adapted into a film, the novel gave fans a literary continuation of the story and revealed Blake's deeper vision of native survival and resistance. Bonus facts: the film sparked tourism on the plains. After Dances with Wolves won 7 Oscars, South Dakota saw a tourism boom with ranch tours and official film trails. For Sioux communities, it was both a boost and a burden, as a story about solitude drew curious crowds to their quiet plains. And as we look back on Dances with Wolves, we also remember Graham Greene, whose gentle strength as Kicking Bird gave the film its soul. His performance touched audiences around the world, and his legacy as an artist and storyteller will continue to live on, just like the film itself. Dances with Wolves remains a strange paradox, a massive Hollywood epic that dared to slow down, speak in another language, and center its story on overlooked voices. It showed us that even in a fading genre like the Western, authenticity and risk could change the way audiences see history. Dances with Wolves wasn't just a Western, it was a gamble that became a legend. If you want more strange and fascinating movie stories, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss the next deep dive. This is Strange Flick Facts, where we uncover the bizarre truths behind your favorite films.